In the meantime, we'll get you caught up and share with you right now some of the latest on the election results that we've been tracking throughout the day. Joining me now from our election desk is Matt Carpenter, Director of FRC Action. Matt, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Did you go home at all, or you been there all night?
Got a quick cat nap, changed my clothes, filled up on caffeine, and we're back at it today. But, election night's over, and we still have votes coming in, still have results that we'd like to share here.
All right, so let's jump right into it. Give us the big ticket results from last night.
Yeah, so currently the Electoral College, we've got a winner. Donald Trump has won 270 electoral votes to become president. He's currently at 294. I think everyone kind of went to bed last night knowing that was the result there. The big development in the presidential race so far since last night, Michigan going to President Trump, 15 Electoral College votes. And if you'll indulge me for a second, Tony, I just want to share with our audience kind of what happened in Michigan. Really, the bottom fell out for Kamala Harris in Wayne County. This was a county that Biden won in excess of 330,000 votes in 2020. And you can see Kamala Harris is really, I think she's at about 230,000 vote lead there in Wayne County. So her voters they didn't show up in Detroit, in Michigan, where she needed them to go. We're also looking at Nevada and Arizona. These are two states where Donald Trump is currently leading, and you got about 60 to 80% of the vote in there. But let me just catch us up quick on Congress. I know.
Let me stop you right there. So what's
Sure.
the explanation behind the poor turnout? Now, looking at the overall numbers, a little surprised because of the strong early vote turnout, but where actually it looks like the total vote may be slightly less than it was in 2020.
That's right. What we saw in the early voting, Tony, was particularly young men in urban areas, specifically non-white young men in urban areas. They weren't returning mail-in ballots. They weren't really going to vote early. There was not a lot of enthusiasm. And I think when that didn't happen for Kamala Harris going into election night, I don't think they had the election day operation to get them to the polls on election day. So they were not able to make up the ground that they needed in early voting to catch up. But that same dynamic also played out across the rest of the states as well. That you see similar result in Maricopa County, Arizona, which Biden won by 90,000 votes. This time, Trump is ahead by about 30,000 votes. And similarly in Las Vegas, in Nevada, Clark County, same thing. About 80,000 votes just disappeared from Kamala Harris's total this time around.
All right, let's look at those congressional races.
Yeah. So we're currently at 52 Republicans in the Senate. So Republicans will flip the Senate. We'll have a Republican Senate president come next Congress. 44 Senate Democrats. The big news since last night, Tammy Baldwin, incumbent Democrat senator, won re-election there. And then also the open Senate seat in Michigan, where Democrat Alyssa Slotkin left her House seat to run for Senate, defeated Mike Rogers. So you got some ticket splitting there in the Rust Belt states, where voters chose Democrat Senate candidates but went for Donald Trump. Similar dynamic. We're also keeping an eye here, Tony, on Pennsylvania. This state has gone blood red. We've picked up 2 congressional seats there that were previously held by Democrats on the Republican side in this northeastern quadrant. We mentioned that last night. That's home to a lot of ancestral Democrats who trend heavily Catholic. They trend pro-life. They did not respond to Kamala Harris's candidacy positively. This was a group of voters that Joe Biden could carry. It's cost the Democrats 2 House seats there, and it might cost them a Senate incumbent in Bob Casey, who's held onto that seat for a while. We're also tracking Nevada. Sam Brown is a surprise here. He's ahead with 89% of the vote in. This is Nevada here, right? I wouldn't want to roll the dice on that, but Sam Brown, that's a surprise for sure. I don't think anyone expected that to be that close. And then also, to cap it off here at the Senate side, Carrie Lake, she's trailing by about 3 points. 63% of the vote reporting in Arizona. There is some vote to go there. She could catch up. That's one to keep an eye on as well. Turning our attention to the House, Pastor Jack mentioned what's going on in California. It's showing up big time in the competitive races. We've been tracking a handful of these super competitive California races. The balance for the Senate was going to be decided by a lot of those states that were going to be competitive at the presidential level. But when it comes down to who's going to control the House, you're looking at a place like California on the West Coast, where you've got just a number of very close races. One I want to highlight, we mentioned last night, Tony, Scott Baugh in California 47. This was an open seat. Katie Porter used to hold this seat. She left to go run for Senate and lost in the primary there, so it's an open Senate seat. Scott Baugh, he was trailing most of last night. He's pulled ahead there. 66% of the vote is in, so we still have some miles to go there in California. But also we want to look at California 27. Mike Garcia, he's been hanging on. This is a district that Biden won in 2020, but he won re-election there. And then also David Valadao. Same story there. This is a district that Biden won in 2020 by 15 points. David Valadao hung on. He's a survivor. If he can do that again, there's a very strong chance you get a Republican House and a Republican trifecta.
Amazing. All right. We didn't get to the states with the ballot initiatives on abortion. We've got about 30 seconds. Give us the highlights on that. We may try to come back to that later in the program, but give us the latest on those.
Yeah, Tony. So some great news for the pro-life movement. Amendment 4 in Florida went down. That failed. That would have enshrined abortion rights in the state constitution there in the Sunshine State. Similarly, in South Dakota, Amendment G failed. Would have done the same thing. It would have enshrined abortion rights in the South Dakota state constitution. And then also a pro-life ballot measure in Nebraska, Initiative 434, succeeded. This would prohibit all abortions after the first trimester. Just a huge win last night for the pro-life movement. Unfortunately, in some states like Colorado and Nevada, New York, Arizona, Missouri, Maryland, Montana, those states did pass their pro-abortion.
All right, Matt, just stand by. We might try to get back to you before the end of the program. Matt, thanks for sticking around. So I want to talk just a moment. I know you've got some more information to share with us, but these life amendments, or actually abortion amendments that were on the ballot, with the exception of Nebraska, they did have a competing pro-life measure that did prevail. Right. The significance here is that this is the first time since 2022 that we've seen these pro-abortion measures put forward by Planned Parenthood and their allies go down in defeat. It's also, I think, significant to note that where we've seen success with the efforts to stop these amendments, we've had leaders, elected leaders, that have spoken very clearly and articulated a very strong pro-life position.
Yeah, absolutely, Tony. And as you played the clip earlier of Kayleigh McEnany pointing out where you got a governor like Ron DeSantis in Florida, right? I mean, look at Florida, right? It went 14 points to the right. There was just an enormous groundswell of support among Republican voters up and down the ballot. So when the incumbent Republican governor comes out and makes the case to voters, we got to support life, vote against Amendment 4, and the voters respond that way. I think there's a lesson there for candidates who want to win over the pro-life vote. You've got to speak to these voters. You've got to tell them where you stand. If they can go out and make a decision about what's going to go in the state constitution, if it's going to support life or it's going to hurt life, you've got to be clear on that. You've got to show that contrast.
And this is a very complex state. It's also a state in which the pro-abortion crowd spent a lot of money outspending the pro-life side. I think, well, I should probably say, because I don't recall exactly, but it was, I want to say, like 7-1, so it was quite significant. All right, Matt Carpenter, what else do we have from last night, or I guess today, as we continue to track the numbers and break them down? Yeah,
a couple things I want to mention, Tony. We were tracking Scott Perry in Pennsylvania's 10th congressional district. This was one as similar to Scott Baugh in California. He had been trailing for a lot of the night. But Scott Perry is ahead now. So he's closed the gap. He got 99% of the vote in. I anticipate that will get called today. Just a huge win and a comeback. He's a survivor. He's been in a tough race since he's been in Congress almost every year. He's often been 100% on our scorecard. It's great to see a solid conservative pull that one out there, hopefully. So we're keeping an eye on that one until that one's called. But I did just kind of want to make a final point. That, you mentioned the investment in the pro-life ballot initiatives. But the Democrats made a huge investment in turning Texas blue. I just want to make a quick point here. Texas went for Donald Trump by 14 points. There was no investment that I'm aware of in the state of New York that went to Biden by 23 points in 2020. But look at New York, 12 points. That just puts, I think, a cherry on top of really how the popular vote moved. I don't think anyone expected New York to be redder than Texas was blue this time. So I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there for both parties going forward. Certainly, again, I'll just make that point one more time. Look at New Jersey. This is a state no one was really paying attention to, Tony. 5 points in New Jersey. So it's possible we're seeing a realignment across the nation, and we'll see states in play in future elections that we didn't even anticipate.
Now, going back to what a lot of the exit polling has shown and what we've seen throughout, that leading the issue set was the economy. People were feeling the policies of this administration, and also, when you talk about feeling, they're feeling scared because of the crime rates and the open borders. I mean, those two issues seem to have been the lead factors in turning many of these counties across the country red.
Absolutely. There was NBC conducted some exit polling from Election Day, and what they found was 71% of voters reported that their attitudes about the state of the country, so kind of how everything is going, as you point out, the immigration issue, the economy, public safety, 71% of them were either dissatisfied with the state of the country or just outright angry. It's really tough as an incumbent to face down that sort of discontent from voters and expect a good outcome.
Now, we're going to be talking with Jody Heiss, president of FRC Action, and our Friday host of Washington Watch in just a moment. But I did want to give you a chance to address some of the victories that FRC Action PAC endorsed candidates had. How did the PAC do last night?
Yeah, Tony, woke up this morning and 100% of the races that have been called for FRC Action PAC candidates were successful. Praise God for that. You know, I don't think we've had a result like that since I've been certainly with FRC Action, but there are still some races to go, so we're not saying we've won all of them, but all of the ones that have been called, we've been victorious there. So, and this is, in the Senate where we had Senator Josh Hawley as an endorsed candidate, and then we had about 65 in the House that we endorsed as well, and we had a few first-time candidates like Marlon Stutzman in Indiana we endorsed, and of course our former colleague Mark Harris. So very excited about those results.
So these are individuals, just so our viewers and listeners know, that those that are endorsed have to reach a certain standard of being pro-life, pro-family. They are aligned with the agenda of the Family Research Council. Absolutely, right. Yeah, and we do make endorsements based on a congressional track record. So we're looking at the votes, and we're talking to candidates, and if they've got that 100%, we're going to back them. Unless there's any other information that we come across that was, maybe a personal reason or something like that, we wouldn't do. But good result. All right, Matt Carpenter, thanks for bringing us up to date. Thanks, Tony.